David Amerland, thanks for joining me here on the code all the way from Greece. How the heck are you today?
I'm really, really well. I'm actually excited to speak to you. I don't know where the conversation will go, but I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here on the code. All you guys that are tuning in, listening to this conversation. Awesome interview lined up for you guys today. We have David here. He's an author. If you listen to the intro of this, you know he's written a bunch of books, and we got connected because he came across our podcast, The Code, while doing some traveling. And I just want to give you a public shout out and thank you for the flexibility and scheduling. Trying to get two busy people together is always tricky, but David, let's start with this. Can you do us all a favor and just tell us a little bit more about you? You've written a bunch of books, you're experienced in a wide range of things, health and fitness, technology, all sorts of stuff. So just tell us the story.
Yeah, it's a lot, it's very fragmented on the surface, but it isn't, and I'm going to explain that. My background is in chemical engineering. I have a master's in quantum dynamics, in a particular aspect of quantum dynamics because the field is huge. And I've translated that knowledge into science writing and science communication, and at some point, business communication, because I was working for a blue chip company in Britain as a director of internal communications. And the workforce at the time was about 250,000 people, so it's quite a sizable sort of
Definitely.
job. So the books I've written primarily, right, are search and digital marketing and branding and trust and decision making using neuroscience and intentionality and now fitness. And they all sound really, really different, but they're not really. I mean, what motivates me in every one of those books, in every one of those fields of activity is us, the human connection, the human operating system, human behavior primarily. And I'm always fascinated by the way context
Mhm.
allows us to behave differently, even though sometimes the intentions of different things may be the same. And sometimes the intentions may be different, but the behavior is the same. And that's endlessly fascinating to me. It's like a mystery. So every time I try to sort of understand within that context, what are the things we should be doing? What are the things we are not doing? And how can we then use that knowledge to achieve more with less energy? And fitness is no exception.
Yeah, you're
Um,
totally right. And as it relates to fitness, there was another, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but there was another podcast that we did or a podcast episode where we talked about how knowledge all by itself does not produce results. Like knowledge without action doesn't lead to anything. It's just information that you have in your head. But what good is it if you don't take it and use it? So talk to us about that for a little bit because you brought up the concept of neuroscience. And obviously, when we start talking about the brain, we start talking about the thoughts people have, the motivations people have, and a lot of times we know something to be true. We know exercise is good for us. We know eating a certain way is healthy for us, but we still don't do it. So how is it that we can have that knowledge, but we still don't do the things that we know?
the $1 million question,
Yeah.
actually the $1 billion question, right? Every year. We spend almost $1 billion a year in exercise courses, classes, and equipment globally. In the United States, I think we spend close to about $135 per person a year on that. So if we look at the motivation in itself, it's certainly there. Certainly, everybody understands logically what they should be doing. They understand the benefits they will get. And here's the magic of it. When we get to the end of the year, which is Christmas, and everybody's a little bit relaxed, they're well fed, they're rested, they're determined to do the right thing.
Mhm.
So start January, gyms are full. We get by middle February, we have about 35 to 40% drop off. We get middle of March, it gets about 65% drop off. By end of April, about 85% of the people have stopped. And this happens year after year.
Yeah.
So then you have to ask yourself why, when we truly, totally understand this, when we have access to information, we have access to the means to exercise. Even if we can't get to a gym, we can exercise at home. We have access to knowledge through podcasts and YouTube. And the fundamental reason, which I went looking for, it goes a lot deeper than that. And it has to do with our neurobiology, which was laid down tens of thousands of years ago. It's still active today. It helped us survive and thrive back then, and today it trips us up. So when we actually examine that and we see the operating code of our cells, then we begin to understand why it doesn't quite work the way we expect it to. And then we begin to sort of understand what we should be doing to make it work better. And let's examine why this is happening. Right, 10,000 years ago, our everyday life, or even 100 years ago, our everyday life would involve walking, climbing, lifting, doing all those things that are physically hard, but they're everyday life.
Yeah.
We wouldn't think of them as exercise. And if we look at the findings from modern day anthropologists or anthrobiologists who embed themselves in the few remaining tribes in the world which are isolated from civilization and have a hunter-gatherer experience, they certainly are very fit, they're very active every day, they do all those things as part of their daily life. I mean, the Hazda tribe in the Tanzania, for instance, they walk 19,000 steps on average every single day,
It's a lot.
which is staggering.
Mhm.
So you think, okay, they're very fit, right? Yes, they are. Do they suffer from the kind of diseases, of cardiovascular diseases, which we do? No, they do not. They have lean body mass, they're fit, they're active. But what do they do when they don't have to do those things? Absolutely nothing. They don't go and lift rocks to be stronger. They don't go and swing the machetes around to be better. They don't try to optimize their movements through specific techniques which need to be developed. They don't tell each other, let's get together and exercise how we should be doing this so it becomes more effective or more efficient.
Yeah.
They do absolutely nothing. They conserve that energy. And that principle of conservation of energy is a survival mechanism which exists to help us survive in an environment where there's a natural calorie deficit or calories are not easy to come by. So we get to a modern world, and I don't know what you have in your refrigerator, but on any given day, I'm pretty sure I've got about 10,000 calories in mine. And I don't have to climb steps anywhere. I don't have to lift anything heavy. I don't have to do any of those things. And I still get hungry. I still go and eat, and I can eat as much as I want if I don't stop myself. And that's why we are disinclined to exercise. We have this natural tendency to avoid the stressor when we don't have a real reason to actually do it. And this is where we begin to untangle it. The real reason to do it in the past was that we had no choice. That was our lifestyle. If you didn't do those things, you would starve and die.
Yeah.
And we get to today, and when do we exercise truly? When do we truly make that commitment and stick to it? If we have had a health scare, or if we know somebody who has had a health scare, we've seen it firsthand, it affected us emotionally, and now we have a strong emotional connection to actually doing the right thing. And that's the reason most people fail. It's not they don't logically understand it, they understand it 100%. But when the emotional connection is not there, the calculus in our head, which calculates the energetic cost of an activity as opposed to the perceived value of the outcome, won't change unless our emotional connection to that changes. So at Christmas, we're all happy and relaxed. We think, oh, yeah, I can do this. I can do this for the next 12 months. Because at that point in time, we don't feel energetically loaded. We're not stressed out. We're not dealing with crisis. We don't have to be at work. We're not dealing with 100 million things being thrown at us from the outside world. We get into January, February, March, and the real world hits us with everything it has. The energetic load on us just to get through the day is pretty high. So unless there's that emotional connection which allows us to calculate in our head, and this is a subconscious calculation which says, sure, I had a tough day, but I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm doing it. So then I'm going to go and do it regardless. Unless that has happened, what do we say? Tough day, cold weather, change, get unchanged, get rechanged in the showers, whatever. All those things are obstacles. So in our head, it becomes a massive thing which we don't stick to.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And, the mind is such a powerful thing, and the emotions really make a big difference. Like we talk about that in our physical therapy practice. We talk about that in, people talk about that in sales and things. You were talking about marketing. Like people make decisions based on emotions, not always based on rationale and logic and whatnot. We make decisions based on how it makes us feel. And you might find a shirt at the store and it might be more expensive than a different shirt. Logically, you might say, "Hey, they're basically the same shirt," but for some reason you feel more pulled towards the one you like better. That might be the one with the more expensive price tag. You purchase it anyways, even though the other one provides you, in theory, the same thing. It's a shirt, it clothes you, it could be the same color. And at the end of the day, you go with the one that makes you feel better when you put it on. And you talk a lot about in the book Built to Last, which is sitting there on the shelf behind you, how, and you just started to go into this, how we're wired to avoid effort, right? Like we're wired to avoid the things that are hard. How can we overcome it? So, how can we like overcome that? How can we emotionally reframe exercise? It's something hard that we didn't have to do, that we didn't do years ago when we were hunter-gatherer type of tribes. How do we reframe it emotionally so that we can make it easier to stick with, so that people don't continue to fall off their goals and fall off the plans that they set for themselves year after year after year?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And you framed it absolutely beautifully because you focused on the emotional content. So let's look at that. I mean, the obvious answer to this, and it sounds really easy to say, is we need to understand exactly who we are and why we do the things we do for ourselves.
Mm,
So if it comes to fitness, I have to define for myself specifically what fitness means to me. And depending on who I am, where I am, how old I am, what's my socioeconomic status, what are the pressures I face in my daily life, that answer is going to be different for everybody. That's why it's a personal thing. If it's not a personal thing, then what happens normally? We tend to take the easy route. We accept the definition that the outside world gives us and says, this is what fitness should be. You should have, I don't know, big biceps, good cardio. You should be able to lift heavy, or you should be able to punch hard, whatever it is, right? If we accept that, we don't feel it, the connection isn't there, and that's why it doesn't last. We'll try it for a while, it's going to be hard, we're going to miss a session, we're going to miss two sessions, we're kind of be patchy, we'll say, okay, now we've broken our streak, let's drop it because life is difficult, we'll pick it up again in a month or two. And of course, a month or two, things are not any easier for us. Life continues to be difficult unless that emotional connection is there. And how would we define that? Well, that's the value we put on what it means to be healthy in the future us. Right now I feel great. The temptation is to say, okay, since I'm okay, I'm managing, I don't have to exercise too hard, I don't have to exercise every day. But the thing is, if I don't exercise too hard, or if I don't exercise every day consistently, there will come a time when I will not feel so good. And of course, then the struggle to get better is very real and it's really hard.
mm,
And what I've done then, I've shortchanged myself. I failed to understand that the way I feel right now is not something which is going to continue forever. Like everybody else, I'm a process. I'm in constant evolution. The outside world is constantly changing me. My internal world is constantly changing. Unless I take some kind of interventionary measure to maintain my health, and that's exercise in this particular case, what I have will not last.
yeah.
And if I don't feel that, I'll fall into the trap and say, oh, I feel okay. I'm doing okay. I'm going to continue sort of training once or twice a week instead of doing something physical every day.
Yeah. Yeah. You just reminded me I was actually on a walk with our son earlier this morning, pushing the stroller, wearing the weight vest, walking through our neighborhood, and he's looking at everything. And I had a set of headphones in. I was listening to a podcast, and one of the topics that we were listening about was bone health. And one of
Mm.
the quotes that the host of the show said is, "You're never going to meet a 90-year-old who says, 'I wish I wasn't this strong. I wish I had less muscles, and I wish my bones were weaker.'" So, knowing that to be true, like all of us are going to want to be fit, strong, resilient, whatever the word is, have good cardiovascular health when we get older. Like we want to be able to continue to do things as we get older. What are you doing now to prepare yourself for that? And if we talk about like goal setting, this is kind of what your answer made me think about is like my favorite way to talk about goal setting is to put the end goal out there. What do you want to do? Let's talk about physical activity. What do you want to be able to do when you're 90 years old? And like write that down. What are the things you want to be able to do? Do you want to be able to go up and down 5 flights of stairs? Do you want to be able to run a mile with your grandkids? Like, what are the things you want to be able to do 15 or 20 body weight squats? Like, you have to name those things so that you can work backwards and sort of like do the reverse stair step down to where you are today and figure out how you're going to get there. How are you going to continue to train? What do you need to do today as a 30-year-old, 40, 50, however old you are, in order to still be able to do those things when you're 90 or whatever age you put out there? Because we're all going to naturally decrease, right? Our muscle mass is going to decrease, our bone density is going to decrease, our um, respiratory capacity is going to decrease. So we have to do things to stave off that the rate that we're declining in order to still be able to do those things. And what we see is people that do continue to train hard, man, they can be quite old and still extremely physically fit. We've got clients in our office that you would not believe they're 70, 75 years old. Like the activity that they still do is much more than the average American out there since I'm sitting here in America. But um, yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? Like preparing yourself
Absolutely.
today for what you're going to be able to do many, many years down the road when that time might be so far off, it's hard to even comprehend.
Absolutely. And I love the way you approach this. Just today, I was going through a study that was released by the Alzheimer's Society. And it was released like 3 months ago and it's peer-reviewed and published. And it's a large-scale study of 2,200 individuals who are over 70. And they were looking at the effectiveness of exercise on preventing degradation of the brain.
Mm,
And what they found was that essentially they separated into two different groups. The control group was exercising, and they were given specific things to do, and they were left to get on with it after the way it was explained to them, the benefits they would. The test group was given a goal-orientated approach, which was highly structured. And what they saw is that the ones who were highly structured managed to reverse
mm,
the aging of their brain cells within a year by up to 2 years. And that's fascinating because we're talking about people who already are feeling the degradation of brain cells because they're getting older and they haven't exercised consistently. And the moment they were given a specific goal-orientated structured program, then they reaped the benefits. And the benefits were significantly higher than the group that just exercised as they could. So when it comes down to now, what should we be doing? And this is how we should be thinking about it. Essentially, what we do now is like putting money in the bank for when you want to retire.
yeah,
So when you want to retire and you can't work anymore, or you don't want to work anymore, the last thing you want to do is to have no money because that's the means through which we survive in the modern world. So when it comes to our health, the equivalent of money is that capability, that physical capability to be able to lift things, control our body, not get out of breath too easily, move our body as we want within the context of our everyday activity.
mm,
And that only happens if we do it now for then.
yeah,
And if we see it that way, if we actually feel it that way, then we begin to structure things a little bit differently because the goal we're heading towards, which is inevitable as in aging, is to remain active, to remain healthy, and to feel in control of who we are. And that also makes us happier, incidentally.
yeah. I want you to speak to the person who it's so hard to have balance in our life, right? It's hard to feel like you are really doing well or performing at the level you want to in all the different facets and areas of your life. And one of the common scenarios that we see, that we hear about, that we read about in books is this person who did a really good job setting themselves up from a business perspective. They set themselves and their family up very well financially. They provided for themselves and their family, but their health suffered along the way. So, what would you say to the person you were just talking about, putting money in the bank, investing, saving for retirement and whatnot? What would you say about the person who is doing a really good job? They've been working, they've been saving financially, they have themselves set up very well for themselves, but they've let their health suffer along the way. How can they start to take control of that and get that back so that they can actually reap the benefits of all the money that they've saved? Because what we see a lot of times is those people that let their health suffer is they end up spending all that money on taking care of themselves in medical bills or nursing homes or whatnot, surgeries and things, when all that stuff could have been prevented along the way. So, how would you talk to or speak to that person to try to start to turn their life around, so to speak, or like get back on the horse when it comes to getting their health in line with their wealth?
There are two elements to the answer to this question. And the first one is when it comes to working hard, when it comes to dealing with the external world, the primary thing we're willing to sacrifice without articulating it as such is us.
Mm,
We're willing to not eat right, not sleep right, cut down on exercise, deal with stress by absorbing it and tampering it down so we don't explode and we end up with chronic stress inside us. And we're willing to do that because we have quite a high tolerance to that until we don't. So this is the first part, and awareness on this, on our tendency to do this, is absolutely key or crucial in order to go to the second part. And the second part is that when it comes to our own fitness, ultimately, the only experts and the only person responsible for that is us.
mm,
Only we know how we feel, only we know how capable we are. Only we are the ones who will be willing to force ourselves to do what we have to do. Ultimately, no one else cares. People may say they do, but they don't really because they can't be with us 24 hours a day. They don't know how we feel. They don't know how they can help us truly manage our emotional responses to the pressures of our day so that we can do what we need to do. So we need to first become aware of this tendency we have to sacrifice ourselves because we feel we can, thinking it's okay, I can do it until we can't. And
mhm.
secondly, we have to truly take responsibility. I mean, if we were our own manager, if we bought a person, invested a lot of money in that person, the only way to get back that investment is to make sure that person is as capable as possible, as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And the only way to maintain that, what do they need? They need good diet, good sleep, good mental health, good physical health. They need those four things. And if we give them those four things, but perhaps give them a chef and give them a sir and give them a therapist, they'll work really hard for us. They'll be really productive. We're going to get our money back.
Yeah.
That's how we should approach it for ourselves. We don't have a manager. We don't have a health therapist. We don't have a sort of a health mental professional helping us out all the time. We don't have a personal trainer shadowing us every step of the day. We
Right.
have to wear those hats for ourselves. So we need to do that.
Yeah, we're the only one that can do it, right? If I hesitate to say this, but like if there was a way that you could purchase it, that you could take a pill for it, that you could just buy your health, people would already be doing that, right? Because we're wired to avoid anything that requires effort. And the easier we can make something, the more inclined we are to do it. So, but we know the answer, it's just not easy, right? These things are not necessarily easy. And a lot of times we talked earlier about the emotion the that like I think you said the term inner critic in your book, like that inner critic in our mind. How can someone identify and manage that voice in their head when they're trying to start this process to make these healthy lifestyle changes that's constantly going to be talking to them and trying to like pull them back, steer them the other way when they're trying to do this thing for themselves?
Well, that inner voice in our head, which we all have, by the way, to varying degrees, is another evolutionary holdover. 10,000 years ago, the person coming out of the caves with his buddy, said, "Hey, look, it's a beautiful day. Why don't we head over those hills and see what's on the other side?" And his friend next to him said, "Are you crazy? We have no support network, no food. We don't know how many threats we're going to encounter along the way. It's just going to be me and you. What can we possibly do? Things can go wrong." And his friend didn't listen to him, right? He went over the mountains, never came back. So the one who stayed has that negative voice. We all have that negative voice because it allows us to thrive in a threat-rich environment. We get into today where we don't have immediate threats to our sort of survival,
Right.
but the voice is still there. And what does it do? It tells you, oh, you failed because you're not good enough, or you're going to try something. It's going to be really, really difficult. We know from actual tests and experiments that have been carried out that people who are tired, when they have to estimate the effort required for a particular distance, they tend to overestimate the effort and overestimate the distance. So this is natural tendency to make things bigger than they are, especially when we're stressed or we're tired, and it really stops us. The moment we are aware of that, we just need to embrace it and say, sure, but at the end of the day, I need to try because I need to know. And that kind of kindness that we extend to ourselves instead of saying, oh, you're weak, or that voice in your head, have demons in your head, etc. Also a natural way of getting around it. When I was researching one of my previous books, I talked to a lot of special forces operatives. They're pretty dialed in when it comes to their fitness and their mental focus, and they still feel that negative voice in their head at the start of a mission, or sometimes in the middle of a mission when things are going wrong.
Mhm.
And instead of thinking, these are really sort of tough, fit, hard people by any sense of the word, is instead of tampering down, what do? They embrace it. They understand that voice is natural. They say, okay, I feel this, it's fear, it's doubt, doubt, it's uncertainty. That's great because I know where it's coming from. I've trained for this job. I know what to do. I know what I need to do to get through it. Or I need to sort of change things so I get a better outcome.
Mhm.
So instead of fighting it, fighting themselves, which is energetically costly and divisive, they tend to embrace it and move on. That's mental strength. This is what we call resilience. This is what we call mental attitude that allows you to go through and win when obstacles are in your path. We need to have that in play for us.
It's so interesting. It kind of reminds me of the topic of like meditation, right? I think a lot of
Mm.
times people are trying to do breathing exercises or they're trying to meditate and they feel like they're doing it wrong if distracting thoughts come into their head. And they think, the person might think, dang it, I really suck at this meditation thing. I just can't do it correctly. Other people are better than me. We get this negative self-talk in our head, and we see it, right? We see it in special forces, um, folks. We see it in athletes. We see it in parents. We see it in kids. We see it in people in the workplace. Do you have any practical tips? Like you just mentioned, like we need to acknowledge it, embrace it, and try to move on from it. Do you have any like steps or practical tips that someone can take to try and improve their ability to do that? Like if they're going through something, whether it's fitness related or not, and they start hearing that negative self-talk, that voice in their head saying you can't do this, you're out of shape, whatever. How can they acknowledge that that's there, acknowledge that that's normal for them to feel that it's not something like unique to them. Everyone has this, and then move past it and move on from it and try to reverse that conversation in their head.
Absolutely. And there are two things you can do. And it always depends on how much time do you have. Um, One of the sort of more time-consuming things you can do is actually ask yourself, where is it coming from? What is it trying to protect you from? So if you say, if you hear the voice in your head that says, you suck at this, you're not very good at this, you shouldn't be wasting your time or effort. You say, okay, what's the protection mechanism here? What is it? Am I afraid of failure? Am I afraid I'm wasting my time? Am I afraid this is not going to work and I'm going to feel weak or ineffectual?
Mm.
And the moment you understand the source of that negative voice, you are beginning to make inroads into basically managing it so it doesn't affect you anymore. Because then you'll have an answer to that. So if, for instance, you say, I'm afraid of failure. And you say, okay, who's going to know? And let's take meditation, for instance. I'm going to try this and I'm going to be really bad at it. I'm going to feel really bad. And you say, okay, you're going to feel really bad. But who's going to know? Just you. Why would you feel bad about trying something? And how can you become good at something? Or how can you be good at something if you have never done it before? We all start from that I am bad, I suck at this place.
Yeah.
And then we get better with persistence. So once you have that inner dialogue, things begin to become clear. And this is, comes back to our original question about fitness, about understanding who you are and why you're doing it. Now, the quick solution to this, if you don't have time to do this, or the inclination in the first instance, because it is a little bit uncomfortable digging into yourself and trying to understand who you really are. So the quick thing is to focus on your breathing. And breathing is the one intervention we can actively put in place that connects the sympathetic and parasympathetic system, essentially the conscious and the subconscious part of us. So if we focus on that, if we just focus on deep breaths, pretty quickly we feel calmness inside us because our body returns to base. Biomarkers, our stress levels and anxiety begin to go down a little bit. We begin to feel better about what we're doing, regardless of how effective it is. And then that allows us to feel good about ourselves. It allows us to feel that it's having some benefit to us, and then it actually does have benefit to us. So this is the quick solution to it. So if you find yourself sort of drowning in your own thoughts, take a really, really deep breath, fill up your diaphragm, relax it, fill up your lungs as much as you can. Take another quarter breath now, even though you can't hold anymore, just pile it in a little bit more. Hold at your slow count of 5, and then slowly exhale through the mouth, and then repeat. And if you do this 2, 3, 4, 5 times, the transformation is quite phenomenal.
We did that exact breathing exercise. We had a team retreat recently for our organization Physio room, and whenever we have team meetings, whenever we do the retreat and stuff, we do a what we call becoming present, a couple minutes where typically we do a breathing or meditation style exercise to kind of just block out the noise, focus on the task at hand here, get centered for this meeting. And that breathing exercise right there that you just described is probably the one that I like the best. I'm much more of a fan of that versus like a box breathing style, for example, where you're just counting even numbers, 4 or 5 seconds in, hold, out, hold. I really like that. Take the deep breath, sip in just a little bit more air, brief pause, and then really slowly let that exhale out and do that a few times. And yeah, like you said, I mean, we all have these wearable devices on and things now. You can even see changes in your data when you do those things, right? If you did that a couple times a day and you go back the next day and look at your day before's data, you can see reductions in your stress or your heart rate or your respiratory rate or whatever during those periods. So we see the data, we feel the change when we do it. So, I mean, that's enough for me. If you feel a difference, it doesn't even matter to me what the data really says. It's like it produced what you were needing it to in the moment if you feel the change. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. If you do this just on a day or two, then you see your base heart rate go down by a couple of heartbeats just on that. Okay. It's nothing else.
yeah, now I'm curious. So you wrote this book. Was there anything that looking back at it now, you feel like you left out? Or like if there was another chapter that you could write to this book Built to Last, um, what would it be now that it has come out and it's published and anything? Like if you could add something to it, what would you add to it?
Um, that's a difficult question because, it kind of feels complete.
Yeah, great.
But if I was to add more things to it, I would perhaps tackle a little bit some of the myths that surround fitness.
Hmm.
Things like you have to be all in, for instance, or do nothing. Things like, no pain, no gain. Those things which still make the rounds and people sort of swear by them because they sound so soundbitey and they're nice and easy to say. But we know these days that they're fairly detrimental. We even know that training to failure, which is one of the triggers for hypertrophy for bodybuilders, actually has a detrimental effect to muscle growth on the next day's training. So, this is we have hard science and hard data now that show that whenever we push the body hard, when we push to fatigue, to points of fatigue, whether it's neurological fatigue, whether it's sort of muscle damage, or whether we have metabolic overload, any of those things, we know that essentially what we're training, what we are forcing the body to adapt for is exactly those things.
Hmm.
So it won't help us become stronger, it won't help us become faster necessarily, but it will make us more resistant to fatigue.
Yeah.
So this approach in the past has worked because most of our role models in fitness have come from athletes who naturally have to push their body to the limit because they are chasing records and they have to absolutely go flat out. Or they come from bodybuilders who, again, are trying to maximize muscle growth within a frame of a body, and they're trying to do everything possible to do that in a symmetrical process.
Yeah.
we go into our everyday life where we want to be strong, healthy, fit, fast, live long, be resistant to illness, be resistant to fatigue. And we don't need any of those things. What we need is a persistent, consistent signal of the muscles to the brain and the brain to the muscles day after day in a way that's sustainable and sustaining. And then we'll get the results that we want to get to. And I would have, if I had another chapter to add, I would have worked on that a
Mm.
lot more because it's a kind of message that doesn't get through very easily.
Yeah, those myths really can kind of like wreak havoc on our mind too when it comes to things. Like we see that. I've been guilty of that no pain, no gain type of mentality, or I'm just going to push through this and I'll deal with it later. I've told this
Mm.
story on this podcast a couple times. Like I've dealt with a pretty significant Achilles complication, my right Achilles, over the past few years, and if I would have just taken care of this more appropriately years ago, I probably wouldn't have gone through the experience that I have gone through in the last few years. Now, it's taught me a lot of things, but it was one of those scenarios where something just wasn't quite bothering me enough. So I didn't do enough about it. I didn't do things about it. And I think that's what happens in our health or in our relationships is something's there. We know it's not ideal. We know it's not how it should be. But the discomfort that we feel about handling that situation, having that hard conversation, getting back into the gym, going out on that first run, like the discomfort that we feel for that stops us from taking the steps to change our circumstance in the first place.
Absolutely. Unless we have an emotional reason that's
Yeah.
strong enough to overcome that, which doesn't always happen, as we discussed. So you're
Well,
absolutely right.
well, let's talk about that for a second because I think this theme is so powerful. Um, What if somebody is listening to this and they have not had yet the health scare, or someone in their life hasn't had the health scare, and like they're struggling with that emotional connection to why I need to be more serious about my health and my fitness or whatnot? What can that person do if they're struggling to have that connection? How can they sort of create it?
There are two ways to approach this again. So let's start with the easiest one. Usually, when we have that emotional connection, we are willing to do pretty much anything, right? So, for me, I get tired like everybody else at the end of my day. I will still get an hour's training. And that intensity of that training will vary depending on how tired I am, how hard the day is, but I will never miss it. I'll never say to myself, oh, I'm going to make up the next day. And I've got a gym, which is like 20 paces away from where I work. So it's really easy because I work from home for me to say, okay, I'll work twice as hard the next day. But I know this is not going to happen. I know that doubling the intensity won't make up for the session I missed. It, it sort of brings up other problems. But I have made an emotional connection of who I am right now to who I want to be as I age. And I'm 60 now, right? So I want to sort of, as I get to that zone where everything theoretically is going to become harder, I wanted to make it for myself as easy as possible, not to feel that difficulty physically. So that's the emotional connection. But let's say, you're in your 20s, you don't think about this. In 30s, I certainly didn't think about that too much because everything comes easy. And as you get into 40s, you think, again, it's relatively easy. So how do I maintain it? Well, this is how you should maintain it. You find ways to exercise or to be active, which are energetically cheap, energetically, and this is the wrong word, energetically low, right? So we lower the energetic barrier. And what do I mean by that? Okay, we have this perception of exercise that it has to be kind of formal. We have to go into a gym, we have to get changed, we have to do all those things, we have to spend at least an hour exercising, shower, change, back, all those obstacles that go into it. And I won't even go into equipment, driving, traffic, clothes, gym membership, more obstacles depending on who you are and how you're situated. So let's not discuss all those. Let's discuss the immediate ones, which is, all those things you have to do. But what if you actually put in exercise into your day naturally? What if you walk from where you need to park to where you need to go and you park a little bit further away every day? What if you make it so that you take the steps every day instead of the lift or the elevator? What if you do it so that you actually carry your shopping on the weekends because you have more time instead of getting into the car and driving back, depending on the distance always, right? I assume, some local shopping here. So these are smart things to do.
Yeah.
They don't cost a lot. They don't feel like exercise. They don't need any warm up. They don't need any special clothes. But this is what they do persistently and consistently. They elevate our base capability level so that we become physically more active, physically more capable each and every day as these accumulate. By the end of the year, we're better than the year before. And because we're better, and our horizons are better, suddenly exercise in a formal setting doesn't seem so daunting because we feel capable. So anything that seems daunting to us, anything that we are disinclined to do, it's because our inner calculus has made an assessment that, this is going to be hard for us. We're not quite up to the task. We need to step up. And yes, we can step up when we feel like it and we feel great. When we feel low, it's a really high step. If we just lower the barrier, if we become better gradually by being smart in our everyday life, then we are basically exercising without feeling that we exercise. We are getting physically better and we're getting mentally better without feeling that we have to kind of work on ourselves. It becomes natural. So that's what I would say. Do that. Be a smart person. Understand that it's your body. You should control it. It shouldn't be the other way around.
Yeah, and all those little things, the parking farther away, the taking the stairs, whatnot. Virtually everybody listening to this can do those things, but we don't always make
Mm,
the choice to do it. But basically, what you're saying, and I agree completely, is if you make the choice consistently to do those things day after day, you're essentially like raising the floor up on your health and your fitness and your abilities from a physical standpoint. Will those things necessarily push your ceiling extremely higher? No, not necessarily, but that's not what most people need. Most people are not chasing after records, bodybuilding, competing in shows, competing in sports necessarily. Most people need to have the physical fitness to play with their kids, do the tasks that they need and want to be able to do, go on the trips with their family and whatnot, be able to lift the luggage into the overhead compartments onto the planes and trains when they're traveling. And raising the floor will really reap the benefits years and years and years into the future. It's I think those I guess what we'll say, those easy things a lot of times are undervalued or underappreciated in terms of the extent to the impact that they can have. Because, like you said, we think we have to exercise a certain way. We think we have to go to the gym. We think we have to lift the weights, use the machines, go for the run, like whatever. And we forget about all the little things that make a big, big difference when you stack them and you add them up over time.
absolutely. Yeah. And that's a brilliant summation. Absolutely. I totally agree.
What about any other habits? We talked about breathing. We talked about ways to cheat little exercise into your day. Is there any other habit from the book that you think kind of gets underappreciated or undervalued, but it has a really big impact in changing people's lives?
Yes, absolutely. It's sometimes, we all sit in front of the television, watch TV, and we just sit there.
Hmm.
And you can actually do small things like stretching your legs, holding your legs up and down sometimes, just doing small steps on the spot. Obviously not while you're watching a film, but in between. And if you do that like over a period of 90 minutes, you do that for 10 minutes, that actually has a significant impact on how tendons work, on how blood neurochemistry works, on how we feel inside ourselves in terms of our major organs. And it feels like nothing. And because it feels like nothing, we tend, as you say, to discount its value and not do it. But if we did do it, we actually reap the benefits. There was a study done about 3 years ago, sorry, 5 years ago, just before COVID, on the blood chemistry changes that happen after a single minute of exercise. And what they did is they took subjects, they exercised for a minute, and they took other subjects that exercised for an hour, and they did blood tests on them. And what they found is that from a neurochemistry point of view, just purely from the chemicals that go through the bloodstream, the differences were marginal, which means that from a neurochemistry point of view, a minute of exercise is the same as 60 minutes in terms of the impact it has on the hormonal profile of our major organs. So if we were to exercise just a minute a day for a year, As you say, would we be visibly fitter? Probably not. But if they were to take our biomarkers, we take our blood pressure and take our perhaps our waist to hip ratio, our body fat, we would have significant improvements on just 1 minute a day
Mhm.
because we're not as stressed. We deal with fatty foods better, just on a simple basis. We deal with sugar better. We deal with stress better. We feel healthier. We breathe deeper, perhaps. So all those changes happen in just a single minute. And because it's only a minute and we tend to not think if it counts, we don't do it, but it does count. And we should be doing it.
Was this, let me interrupt you real quick. Was this study, I think I remember the one that you're talking about. Was this study one where those individuals, that 1 minute of exercise, like was pretty intense that they were doing? It was a fairly intense 1 minute. I remember a study where I think the subjects or the participants in there were doing, for example, like 10-second sprints on a echo bike or an
Yes.
assault bike,
Yes. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like it was like a 10-second sprint, and then they rested, I forget, maybe for 1 minute, and they did that 6 times. So essentially they did 6 10-second sprints to equal 1 minute of total exercise. And like you said, they noticed significant changes in
Yes.
their blood sugar, their cardiovascular, their waist measurements, whatnot. Is that the same one?
It is, yeah, absolutely. But extrapolating from that, essentially, we realize that the body, once it gears up for exercise, doesn't significantly differentiate on its neurochemistry between an hour and a minute.
Mm,
So, just doing a little bit, you say, I'm going to walk, to my neighbor's house and back. I'm going to go around the block, which is like 5 minutes or something. And you think, okay, is it going to do much? The answer is visibly no, but internally quite a lot, and you
mm.
should be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I've had the conversation with people if you're lacking the motivation to want to go do something, to want to go to the gym, to want to go on the walk, go on the run, do the exercise. I think I called it like give it the 10-minute test or the like give it the 10-minute try. Go do it even though you don't want to. And if like set a timer, like literally on your watch or on your phone, set a timer for 10 minutes or based on this conversation we're having, that timer could probably even be less than 10 minutes. And if at the end of that 10 minutes you still don't want to be there and don't want to do it, then leave because ultimately it's your choice. But the chances are really high that as soon as you start and you get past that initial discomfort of walking through the door or putting on the clothes or the shoes or whatever, and you actually start, you're going to start to trigger those neurochemical processes to take place and you're going to want to keep doing it until you finish what you had set out to do. The chances of you starting it, doing it for 5 or 10 minutes, and stopping are really, really small. So it's probably only going to be like a single digit number of times that someone would actually start and then still not feel like they want to keep doing it because of those changes that start taking place within us.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to add a bit of science to what you said. First of all, I love what you said. The 10-minute thing absolutely works. Okay, I do it for myself when I don't feel like exercising for various reasons, tough day, lack of motivation, whatever. I go and exercise for 10 minutes. It always turns out to be an hour.
Yep.
But here's the science behind that. They found that essentially, if the muscles work for 10 minutes nonstop, and it doesn't have to be intensive work, it can be light work. Essentially, they produce a hormone that affects the dopamine producing centers of the brain, which affect our motivation. And we recalculate then the amount of stress or the level of stress that we actually feel because of exercise. It drops that value in our head and we tend to continue doing what we're doing. And the basis of that, again, incidentally, lies in the ancient past, right? Because when did we have in the past, 10,000 years ago, and any time between that, when did we have to be active for 10 minutes? Because it happened when we were running for our food
Yep.
and we had to catch it, or we were running so we didn't become food and we had to avoid it. So what happens if you work out for 10 minutes and your muscles work for that length of time? You get tired, signals go from the muscles to the brain, I'm fatiguing. The brain says, okay, you're reaching fatigue point, you need to stop. But if you stop, you don't catch your food, so you starve, or you get caught and you get eaten, not a good outcome. So the brain then at the 10-minute mark recalculates what happens. These hormones come into the dopamine center, dopamine producing center in the brain. then that changes the reward system. So what happens, we reevaluate the effort of the activity we're undergoing, and what felt stressful now doesn't feel as stressful anymore in our head. So now we're inclined to keep on doing it because we think, hey, now this kind of got easier. What we call the warm-up period, right?
Yeah.
But that's what it is, right? This is the sort of neuroscientific sort of foundation of it. And that's why your 10-minute rule is so great. That's why I go and exercise for 10 minutes on my stopwatch. I make a deal with myself. I say, if I don't, 10 minutes, if I don't feel like it at 10 minutes, I'm going to stop. I'll take 10 minutes and that's it. And
Yeah.
it never happens. After 10
Our,
minutes, I sort of keep on going.
our body is so incredibly sophisticated in all
Yeah.
that it does, all that it can do, all that it can withstand. When we don't treat it well, it can continue to chug along, right?
Mhm.
And the warm-up period is, I mean, it is so much more than just preparing your tissues, right, for the activity that you're about to do. Like it's all of the above. It's you're warming up the muscles, the tendons, the joints, you're getting the heart and the circulatory system prepped. And I love that explanation you just gave us. You are preparing the mind, and you're having all these chemical changes to get you mentally prepared for the exercise that you're about to go through. It's really quite fascinating when you think about all of the things that are working. And we think of cars and automobiles and stuff being like very complicated and all the different moving parts that have to work together to power that machine. But our body is just 10 times what that is. I mean, it is really quite complex and really fascinating when you pause to think about it.
We're a miracle. We really are. And, talking about complexity of cars, before the electric cars, the average car had about 10,000 working parts. Now with electric cars, tend to reduce that to maybe a couple of thousand, 3,000 the most.
Yep.
We have over 30 trillion cells.
Trillion. Wow.
So it's just like, it's just, it's mind-boggling when you think about it. And they all have to work in sync. Everything has to be just right. We're just a miracle when you think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild. One final kind of like fun question I've got for you. Is there any favorite exercise or movement that you have? Like something that, some people say, "Oh, I really love to do squats," or some people love to run. Like, what is your favorite type of exercise or fitness thing to do?
I've been doing martial arts
Mm,
since I was 13. I've got a black belt in three different styles. I'm a certified Taekwondo instructor.
cool.
I competed nationally and internationally for 10 years between 1991 and the year 2000. So there's a thing which I love doing, which is going on the bag, and I do combinations. It's a heavy bag. And the reason I love doing it is because it's remorseless, right? You empty yourself on it. It grounds you. It's a very humbling experience because it doesn't matter how much you put into it. It's just still there and it just drains you and you just keep on going.
Yep.
So, when I sort of need to mentally and physically empty myself, that's my favorite thing to do because afterwards you got nothing left. You feel like cleaned out.
Yeah. How many days a week do you do some form of martial arts related training?
I do something every day,
Yep.
even when I do weights. So I'll start with stretching, I'll do some kicks, I'll do some shadow boxing, then I'll do weights.
Got it.
So it's an everyday thing, but there are 3 days a week when I'll do exclusively martial arts training with body weight exercises thrown in.
Yeah.
And that'll be between 90 minutes and a couple of hours at a time.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I mean, I love that what we sort of talked about is, you know, finding easy ways to incorporate stuff into your daily routine. That does not necessarily mean you have to go to the gym 7 days a week. That doesn't mean you have to go for a run 7 days a week. In fact, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. As a physical therapist, if you've not been doing that, I don't want you to go to the gym and try to lift heavy 7 days a week. I don't want you to start running 7 days a week. I don't even really want our elite runners to run 7 days a week just because we know that it increases the likelihood of having an injury in some of these things. So we need to balance. We talked about working hard, but balancing the recovery and not always pushing it to the limit. Um, just to use the car analogy again, you're not going to drive your car with your foot pressed all the way to the floor all the time. There's going to be variation in the speeds that you're traveling to help you get to where you're going. And it's the same thing in our body. Like we need to grade our intensity and our effort to help us be able to get to the outcome without having setbacks as best we can. And I don't want to gloss over the fact that, we were talking about the blood chemistry and the neurochemical changes that take place when we start moving. There was another study that just recently came out. It was kind of comparing going for a 30-minute walk in the day versus this was using the example of like someone who's working on the computer for 8 hours a day, sitting down at a desk. And what's better for your cardiovascular system? What's better to reduce the blood sugar and help us from a health perspective throughout our day? Is it at one point in the day going for a 30-minute walk, or every 45 minutes standing up and doing a set of 10 body weight squats? And actually, the set of squats repeated multiple times throughout the day had a more profound impact on our blood sugar throughout the day in that study. And I just love to use the term movement snacks for these things. And you were mentioning if you're sitting down watching television or something or watching a movie, like doing things, moving your body rather than just being static the whole time. And that's one of my favorite times to have clients do the little exercises that don't take a lot of mental effort. It could be working on hip mobility. It might be doing some soft tissue work using a foam roller or a massage gun or a ball to mobilize tissues that are feeling bound up or tight. It might be doing some light stretching. And if you can incorporate and do that while you're doing something else, while you're watching the movie, while you're whatever it is, hanging out with your kids, get down on the floor and put yourself in a position that challenges your hip mobility versus sitting on the couch when they are playing on the floor in front of you. Like get down there with them. It's going to make your body be exposed to different positions that you're not going to touch all the time so that you can continue to have access to those ranges and those activities and positions. So yeah, those movement snacks are so big. And if you're like me and you definitely are from like you like to move your body every single day, when there's a day where it's really hard to do that, imagine you're on an international flight or you're traveling or you're in a long meeting all day where you do have to stay like in one position for a long time. My body feels terrible after those days. I feel so stiff, I feel so sore, even though I didn't do anything very physical. Those are like the days that I feel the worst.
Yeah, absolutely. All the aches and pains come up, and you feel terrible inside your head.
Hmm.
But I've got a hack for those days, especially when it's long flights. And before
Yeah.
COVID, I used to travel a lot, and I do calf raises. And because there's nothing else you can do when you're trapped in an aircraft, you can't really sit around and walk around too much, and you can't really do a lot of active stuff.
Yep.
But we know now that essentially the muscles activated by calf raises raise the metabolic rate significantly, disproportionately for the amount of activity that's actually involved.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of benefits in the circulatory system. So little hacks like that in our repertoire allow us to feel that we're in control of our body.
Yep.
And that sense of control then reduces anxiety, drops cortisol levels, allows us to feel that we haven't dropped off the wagon, we haven't wrecked our streak. And these are important things. They're little things, but they're important to actually have in a sort of a toolbox
Yeah.
because they allow us to do those things when we feel we can't do anything else.
Yeah, yeah, I love that hack. And whether you're a runner, whether you're not, I think most of us could benefit from a little bit more calf strengthening, anyways. So it is a great recommendation that you have right there. David, let's get us out or get you out of here on this. What did we leave out from this conversation? I kind of want to ask you a broad question here. Is there anything that we glossed over or that we skipped as I was asking you questions or as you were giving your thoughts? Anything that we missed that you think this episode wouldn't be complete with unless we mentioned it?
Yes, I think tangentially we touched upon mindfulness when we exercise. It is really, really critical. We have studies on this that show that, if you have a mirror giving you feedback, the classical bodybuilding situation where they pose in front of a mirror and work out and they follow the muscle movement, you can get as much as 15 to 20% more out of that movement as opposed to somebody else doing exact same movement, without the visual feedback.
Yeah.
And that's because the brain mirroring that movement allows it to visualize better the position of the body in 3D space, which is proprioception. It allows it to better interrogate the body as it moves, which is interoception. And then that allows it to allocate resources for those very specific movements. So for bodybuilders, we tend to think that it's a vanity thing that they exercise in front of a mirror. Traditionally, over time, they've seen they get better results. We know that if we visualize what we do in our head better, and things like shadow boxing come in, and shadow sparring, which is in boxing, and also in martial arts. If you visualize a combat situation where you're basically, what you're doing is a scenario in your head, the neurons activated in the brain are the exact same neurons that you would practice in a real life situation.
Right.
So not only do you get to get your body moving better, but you also allocate more resources. It's a more effective exercise. It will make you stronger, it will make you faster, it will burn slightly few more calories than if you were just doing it on autopilot, thinking, I'm going to throw a punch because that's what I'm doing, but not really visualizing it.
Yeah.
So that visual element, that thing which puts us inside our body, so we really feel it, is critical at a time when we don't have masses of time to actually put in. So if you had 2, 3 hours a day to exercise, would not visualizing play a role? Probably not. But usually we exercise anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour each, on a day, and that's a good sort of day. So every second counts in that time frame, and being able to squeeze more out of it by being present, by understanding the exercise, by understanding how body moves is actually, getting more return on our investment.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to be more efficient, right? Everybody wants to squeeze more out of less time. And I've never heard somebody say, oh, gee, I wish I had less time to exercise. So the more effective we can make the time that we do have, man, I think, and what's cool is it works not just for exercise, it works for all sorts of things. Like you just mentioned, the brain doesn't really know the difference between you doing something and you visualizing that you're doing something. And it activates the same neurological pathways. I feel like, at least in my life, we talk about this the most in the context of athletics and sports.
Mm.
And I played American football for many years. So we would be going through the playbook or watching film. And the coaches would instruct us to visualize yourself running the play. If you are the backup, um, whatever position, quarterback, receiver, linebacker, if you're the backup and you're watching other players on the field running through reps at practice, you shouldn't just be standing there watching on autopilot. You need to be visualizing yourself going through the play because getting those mental reps from a mental standpoint is the exact same as the people that are doing the actual reps on the field. Of course, they're having a little bit more physical activity with it, obviously, but in terms of the mental grasping of the concepts and being able to then put them into action on game day, it's the same. So it doesn't just work though in fitness and in athletics. It works in all the areas of your life. And the one I think that I've been the most cognizant of over the past year and a half is in the parenting realm, right? One of the things we talk about is being able to control your emotions when your child is just flying off the handle, throwing a fit, or don't give them the reaction that would, lead them to continuing to do that thing more and more and more. And if you can visualize yourself handling those situations with calmness, like with a good demeanor before they actually happen, the chances that you're going to be able to handle those situations calmly in the moment are so much better rather than just waiting and reacting and hoping for the best outcome, but you didn't mentally prepare yourself for it at all. So, yeah, that was good. That was a nice kind of wrap up because I think that topic's as important as anything else that we talked about so far. If people want to dive into this more, David, where is the best place for us to include in the show notes that people can find more information about you, your book, Built to Last, one of the other 18 books that you've written and authored? Where can people find you out there?
You can find me at davidamerland.com. I put out sort of very brief notes on studies that come out and how they relate to stuff which we've discussed. And every day there's sort of new stuff published. So during the week, I probably have two or three snippets like that, which I share openly. And I explain the significance of those studies and how they reflect back on us. And then I put out a lot of sort of bigger articles, longer articles, which go deeper into some of the aspects of what I'm exploring when I write. And obviously, if you get on my website or if you Google me, you'll find all my socials.
Awesome. We'll include all that stuff in the show notes. And I would encourage you guys, if you listened to us here on the code and you've made it to the end of this episode, to hop onto those sites, check out David's books. I mean, if there's something that piques your interest, definitely go get it and dive into it. David, I really just want to say thank you and appreciate your time hopping on here, going through the scheduling process. I mean, we planned this months ago, and then you were flexible, swapping with somebody and or helping out in a pinch. So I really appreciate your coordination, your flexibility, and all the awesome insight that you gave us here today on the code.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Nope, the pleasure is all mine. You guys that tuned in to listen to us, thank you again for spending your time with us on the code. If you've listened before, you've heard me say this, and if it's your first episode, please go do it now. Now's the time that we ask a favor of you to go drop a review on this podcast. Whether you're on YouTube, you're on Spotify, Apple, or whatever platform you're on, there's a review section, and a 5-star review would help us get this out to more and more people so we can spread this information out there and help other people. So if there's someone you think of that could benefit from this conversation, please share it with them. And to all of you and David, we'll catch you guys next time on the code. We'll see you later.